So if y'all are watching this video, that means that 1, Jimmy Butler was not traded yet, or 2, he was traded, but I already uploaded this video and forgot to cancel it. And I guess there's a third option in which I still post this video anyways, because 1, I worked really hard on it. And then 2, I guess you could compare whatever package we did get for Jimmy Butler if he was traded with the deals that I'm showing in this video. But anyways, the reason I'm talking in future tense here is because I'm actually on vacation right now. I'm celebrating my 5-year anniversary with my beautiful girlfriend. We're taking a trip to New Mexico and doing like the whole snowy cabin in the mountains type of vibe. So it should be a good time. But we're going to be there from January 30th to February 3rd. And I didn't want this channel to stay dormant for a few days, so I pre-recorded this video, which I'm currently filming on January 28th, which is the day that Shams actually broke the news that the Kings might be trading De'Aaron Fox. So maybe De'Aaron Fox is on the Heat by now, by the time y'all watching this video. I don't know, but you would know. Yeah, he's probably not. But anyways, I absolutely despise long intros, so I'm sorry to doing that to you. But let's get right into this video where we're going to be talking about 4 former All-Stars that have been linked to the Miami Heat recently that we could potentially acquire, I guess, in a Jimmy Butler trade. The trades aren't great. I mean, I ordered them in terms of ones that are the ones I dislike the most to the ones that I like the most, but none of them are great. I'll be honest with you. I want to put that right up front right now. And the truth of the matter is that you're not going to get a lot of great assets in return for Jimmy Butler. He's 35, demanding a max deal. You obviously got the locker room concerns, which I'm sure are probably scaring some GMs away. He's got injury concerns. It is what it is at this point. You're not going to get a lot of great assets in return for Jimmy Butler. I personally think that the Heat should just move off him for some expiring deals, get some cap flexibility, even though free agency doesn't exist anyways. So I guess maybe that would be a good reason to try to trade for a former All-Star, because we know the Heat are never going to tank. So if they can get one of these guys, maybe they can convince themselves that they can still compete. But anyways, the first guy that we're going to talk about is Andrew Wiggins, who, yes, obviously doesn't help the Heat compete right now, but he is technically a former All-Star, which is crazy that he was an All-Star starter at one point. It's just wild. But the reason this is my least favorite deal is because his contract is terrible. He was looked at just last year as maybe the worst contract in the league. He probably doesn't have that title anymore, but it's not great. You know, he's getting paid $26 million this year, $28 million the next year, and then $30 million the year after that. That is a player option in that final year, and truthfully, I can see it go either way, whether he accepts it or not. It all depends how he plays next season, because let's say Wiggins goes out next year and he balls out, well, then he'll opt out. You know, he'll be 30 years old, and he could probably re-sign for a 4-year deal or sign elsewhere for a 4-year deal to kind of secure that last long-term big money contract for himself. But if he goes out next season and he's bad, well, no one's going to pay him $30 million for a season. So he probably would opt into that player option there. It is a bit tricky with these guys that are around 30, 31 years old, because that's kind of the age where maybe they would give up less money per year to secure themselves into a longer deal. Wiggins, for example, maybe he opts out and doesn't make $30 million in 2026, 2027, but maybe he makes, $27 million every year for a 4-year span. So sometimes players of that age kind of like to do that sort of thing. So I could see it being, a toss-up, whether he accepts that player option or not. But of course, if you're the Miami Heat, you have to operate under the assumption that he is going to, which would mean you have Wiggins under contract for another 2.5 years, which I do not want to do. Now, we'll take a look at his numbers, because he is having a relatively decent season compared to his last, because last season was terrible. He was averaging 13 points per game. He was shooting 45% from the field, 35% from three. It wasn't great. I know he did have some personal issues, so maybe that affected his play, because this season, he's kind of back to the same numbers that he was at for the other years in his Golden State tenure. He's at 17 points per game, 45% from the field, 38% from three on 6 attempts, which is actually pretty decent. Of course, he'll always get you a couple assists and a few rebounds. So the numbers are fine, but he's not a guy that I want to pay long-term money. And even when he was an all-star starter, his numbers were virtually the same. But that was already 4 years ago at this point. At that point, he was 26. He was a much better defender. He's just not the same player anymore, and not a guy that I want to pay. And I did go ahead and make my own mock trades for all these guys. This one was very difficult to do. just because the Warriors have so much money tied up into Draymond Green and, of course, Steph Curry. And they just traded for Dennis Schroeder, who makes $13 million. So that is one of the more movable contracts. But I don't know if they would want to move him, even though they just got him. Even though he's kind of stinking up the joint, so maybe they do want to move him. But anyways, we know the Warriors have had some interest in Jimmy Butler. We've heard that they might be doing a second look at possibly acquiring him, since it looks like the Suns thing might not be possible because nobody wants Bradley Beal. So in this trade, I have the Heat getting Andrew Wiggins, Gary Payton II, and Kyle Anderson, as well as 2 first-round picks from the Golden State Warriors. And the Detroit Pistons get Buddy Hield and a second-round pick, just because we need another team to help make the money work. We heard this work with the potential deal with the Bucks, because the Bucks would be over the second apron if they traded for Jimmy, so they would have to send out Pat Connaughton, and the Pistons are a team that you keep hearing that could maybe take on some of these players because they do have cap space. That's why in this trade, I have them getting a second-round pick for the Miami Heat, just to kind of incentivize the Pistons to take on that 4-year Hield contract, which is not bad. And the Pistons can always use more spacing. They did a good job this past offseason getting Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley, but they still have a bunch of other guards that can't shoot, whether it's Marcus Sasser, Jaden Ivey, who's hurt. So the Pistons will need someone this year to kind of help them on their playoff run. I think Buddy Hield can do that. And obviously you got Cade Cunningham there. So it's mostly just a salary thing at this point, and the Pistons get a second-round pick, but I don't think it's a nothing trade for them. And then obviously the Warriors get Jimmy Butler here. So they're really going all in to try to win one more with Steph Curry. Do I think that team is a contender with Jimmy Butler? No. But I think the Warriors do owe it to Curry to try something, try their best to give him some help, because you never know. Maybe they get into the playoffs. Maybe Curry gets hot. Jimmy turns into playoff Jimmy. And maybe they could go on a run to the finals at the very least. Who knows? At least they're doing something. And I think they owe that to Steph Curry instead of just having him wither away on mediocre teams for the last few seasons of his career. Obviously, this is the only trade that I have today in which the Heat get multiple first-round picks, because that's a pretty decent haul, I think. And the only reason they get that many picks is because the Warriors are essentially attaching 1 first-round pick to Wiggins to get rid of his salary, sort of incentivize the Heat to take it on. And then they're getting a second first-round pick, which is basically what they're getting for Jimmy Butler. So yeah, I mean, it's not a great trade for the Heat, but if you're looking to gather up first-round picks so you can send them in a package for De'Aaron Fox down the line, or send them in a package for the next disgruntled star, it's not the worst thing in the world. And I guess if that disgruntled star becomes available in a year or 2, the Wiggins contract would be more movable than it is now, just because it would have less years on it. But yeah, this is what I got for the Andrew Wiggins deal. The next guy that we're going to talk about is Julius Randle. I know, don't stop the video. Heat fans do not want Julius Randle. There was a report that came out today that said the Heat might be interested in him, which I think is stupid. Maybe it's something they looked at in the past, but why would they look into Julius Randle right now? You got Khalil Ware, Bam Adebayo starting together. Nikola Jovic, at the time of this recording, is right after the Magic. They beat the Magic in double overtime. So we saw Jovic, Ware, and Bam just absolutely thrive as a unit together. Why would they want Julius Randle? Well, they don't want him as a basketball player. They might want him as a contract, because what you see here is he's making $33 million this year with a $30 million player option next season, almost $31 million. And again, with the player option, similar to Wiggins, I could see him accepting this or not. Really depends how the rest of this year plays out and what other offers he could get out there on the market. But contract-wise, it's got a whole year less than Andrew Wiggins, and it's a potentially expiring deal if he was to decline that player option. And I think having that one less year is huge, because even if Randle does accept that player option, his money will come off the books for that big potentially big 2026 free agency, which I just think is important to at least get yourself into position to sign someone in case that free agency is as lucrative as it might be. Because you got guys in there like De'Aaron Fox if he doesn't get traded, like Luka Doncic if he doesn't sign an extension. I don't think that stuff is likely, but it at least puts you in a position to do it. I know Julius Randle's not having that great a season in his first year with Minnesota. He's only averaging 19 points per game, but it's on 46% from the field, which isn't terrible, but 33% from 3, which obviously is just not good at all. He's really had one season where he shot good from 3, and with the Knicks, it was back in 2021, where he shot 41% from 3, but very clearly that was fluky at this point. But he's a 3-time All-Star. He's not a bad player, at the end of the day, he's still averaging 19 points per game. He's getting you 8 boards this year. Wow, that's actually down a lot because he was, a double-digit rebounder guy for most of his time in New York, which is something the Heat could have used. If the Heat didn't have Khalil Ware blossoming, or if they didn't draft him, or if they didn't have Nikola Jovic taking this huge leap, you could have convinced me to maybe even want Randle as the player, but not anymore. I liked his toughness. I liked his physicality. The Heat didn't have that. But at this point, they don't really need it. So that's why it just kind of comes to the point where you'd be using him as a contract. Maybe you play him off the bench, which sounds ridiculous to say. I know, paying a guy that's getting paid that much, or playing a guy that's getting paid that much money off the bench. I just don't see a role for him here. But that being said, I like it better than the Wiggins deal because of the less year. This is the trade that I cooked up, which was an extremely, extremely difficult one. I tried to get Jimmy to the Minnesota just because we heard some rumors that they might want to circle back to him. I know Jimmy didn't like that organization, but I know a lot of his problems were with Cat and Wiggins, who are no longer even there. So I don't know. It's hard to say whether they would want him or not, but I couldn't get it done. So I had Jimmy going to the Grizzlies because we know they might also circle back around to him. But in this fully long trade, I have the Heat getting Julius Randle, the Luke Kennard expiring contract. And then this is basically the assets that we'd be getting for Jimmy Butler. We'd be getting Rob Dillingham, G.G. Jackson, and Jalen Wells. The Timberwolves, we know they would want expiring money because that's why they traded Karl Anthony Towns for Julius Randle. It was to save money because they still got to pay guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Naz Reid. They got to pay those guys. So if they can get an expiring contract to Malcolm Brogdon and Josh Richardson, that greatly helps them. And then I do have them getting Brandon Clark, who is still an okay player. He's not getting paid a lot of money, and maybe they could use him. The Grizzlies are getting Jimmy Butler, Alec Burks, and a second-round pick from the Heat because they're sending, a few assets over to Miami. And then the Wizards are getting Marcus Smart and John Conchar. So essentially an upgrade over Malcolm Brogdon. If you want to flip that second-round pick from the Heat to the Wizards to incentivize them to take that deal, you can do that too. I just threw a second-round pick in there because I can. But from the Heat side of things, listen, I know we don't want Randle. I know you want picks. But like I said earlier, I don't think it's super likely. So if you could walk out of this with G.G. Jackson and Jalen Wells and Rob Dillingham, that's not a bad little haul. We already got a nice young core, right? With Jovic and Ware and Bam. You got the big men, but now you could add a guy like Rob Dillingham, who's really stepped it up for Minnesota over the last 5 games. He's shooting like over 50% from 3 now that he's actually starting to get some run. He's playing really well. Maybe he can fill in that Terry Rozier role when the Heat inevitably move off of him. A guy like Jalen Wells, he's shooting 39% from 3 in high volume. He's a big guard, 6'8" guard. Oh, you telling me he wouldn't fit perfect next to Hero, Jovic, Ware, and Bam? I think that would be great. And then G.G. Jackson is still only 20 years old, has potential just through the roof. We saw him torch the Miami Heat in the Summer League. Really big body, has a jump shot on him, great rebounder. This Heat team needs backup big men, and having a guy like G.G. Jackson to play a developmental role in that spot, I really think could be great for the Miami Heat. So it's maybe not the best return for Jimmy Butler, but maybe it's the best we can do. And the next trade that I want to talk about is probably the one that has Heat fans most excited right now, and that's Zach Lavine, which is kind of crazy to say because just last season, the Bulls were practically willing to give him away for nothing or even attach picks to get rid of him. That's how bad his contract looked like. They were saying him and Andrew Wiggins had 2 of the worst contracts in the entire league because, of course, last year, Lavine had a lot of injury concerns and he was and still is getting paid a lot of money. This year, he's making $43 million. Next year, he's at $46 million. And then the year after that, at 31 years old, he has a player option for $49 million. And just like Wiggins and Randle, I could see Zach Lavine either accepting or denying that player option. It really depends how well he plays over the next year and a half. But I'll tell you this, if he keeps playing like he is now, he's definitely opting out of that deal and re-signing for a whole lot of money because now he's looked at as a positive asset, and that's due to his blazing hot start this season in which he's averaging 24 points per game, shooting 51% from the field, and a wild 45% from 3 on 7 attempts, which is just crazy. Now, is it sustainable? Probably not, but he is a career 39% three-point shooter, so he's always been a good three-point shooter. And of course, this Heat team needs offensive help. They could use another scoring punch next to Tyler Hero because for most of the season, our offense has been hero or bust. So they could certainly use a guy like Zach Lavine. But truthfully, I get a little bit concerned with the fit. Not that Zach Lavine has always been on ball, because he is playing alongside Kobe White, who's having another great year. And obviously Tyler Hero has been playing a lot more off ball this season as well. But they still are two pretty ball dominant guards. I would still say that about them. And I feel like it's a similar concern that we had with Terry Rozier, which obviously has not worked out. And when we brought Terry in, we were all saying, oh, the Heat needs scoring. Terry could help that. Well, he hasn't helped that. But at the same time, it is wildly disrespectful for me to compare Zach Lavine and Terry Rozier. So I'm not going to do that. Overall, Zach Lavine is a great player. The problem is, though, he is getting paid a ton of money. So if you bring him to this team, you are committing to him as being a part of your core. Because if you're paying him, you're paying Tyler, you're paying Bam, you can't then afford to bring in a 4-star in here. Now, maybe you would have that contract to maybe trade down the line in a year or two where he doesn't have as much years left on his deal. So maybe you could get De'Aaron Fox if he isn't traded this year, and maybe they trade him next year. So you can work with a few things there. So in general, I can be talked into bringing Zach Lavine to this team is a good thing, especially if it's for a deal like this, where this time, again, we have Jimmy Butler going to the Grizzlies. We have the Chicago Bulls getting Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, and Luke Kennard's expiring contract. And then the kind of assets that they are getting for Zach Lavine would be Jaime Jaquez from the Miami Heat, a first-round pick from the Miami Heat, and then a first-round pick for the Grizzlies. And then, of course, the Heat are getting Zach Lavine and John Conchar just to kind of make the salaries work. So for the Bulls side of things, I think it's decent value. I mean, you're getting Jaime Jaquez, who is a great young player. Brandon Clark, he looked like he could be a great young player. I'm still a little iffy on what his value is at this point. But you are getting those 2 first-round picks. And when you compare that to last year where you would have got nothing for Zach Lavine, I think the Bulls should maybe be happy with this, because although Zach Lavine's having a great season, that still is a massive contract that is very, very hard to trade, because not a lot of teams have equal money that they can move. Well, the Miami Heat have Jimmy Butler, so that's why they can make this work in a 3-team trade. So I think it's decent value for them. From the Grizzlies side of things, they don't have to trade any of their super valuable young players. You know, they get to keep G.G. Jackson. They get to keep Jalen Wells. So if you're saying that they just need to trade a few smaller contracts, I know Marcus Smart, I'm unsure. He's kind of fell off since his DPOY, fraudulent DPOY, but still, he's kind of fell off. He's had his own injury concerns. I don't think the Grizzlies would miss him too much. So essentially, the Grizzlies are acquiring Jimmy Butler, who could walk at the end of the season. So that's obviously a concern for them. But they got a whole war chest of first-round picks. I don't think they would mind taking a risk with one of them to acquire Jimmy Butler. So overall, I think this is a decent trade for all 3 teams. And the final trade that I have here, which is probably my favorite one, is for Brandon Ingram. And y'all can see by his contract right here, it's because he doesn't have a lot of money left on his deal. He is on an expiring contract getting paid $36 million. Obviously, the biggest concerns with him is the injury stuff. This season, he's only played 18 games. I know he's missed like the last 7 weeks with an injury that they said was only supposed to last 4 to 6. So very clearly, he does have that injury bug label. He is more injury prone than a Zach Lavine. This year, he's played 18 games. Last year was 64, but the couple years before that was 45 and 55. But that being said, he's still only 27. He has time to sort of shed that injury bug label. I know he was an all-star 5 years ago when he was 22, but he's still young. So I still have some faith in him that he could sort of turn his career around to back where he was, as an all-star. Maybe not all-star level, but a guy who could play close to that caliber of player. And maybe he does have an easier time staying healthy. When he has a guy like Tyler Hero to share the offensive load with him, guys like Bam Adebayo and Khalil Ware to help him out defensively. I think the potential is still there, because his numbers this season when he did play, they were still good. I mean, he was averaging 22 points per game on 46% from the field and 37% from 3 on 6 attempts. And obviously, he's a 6'9", small forward, so the Heat would still be getting that size that they still need. I know you got Jovic, Ware, and Bam playing well, but at the same time, you can never have enough size. And I think Brandon Ingram will be kind of a seamless fit in that starting lineup, probably better than Zach Lavine, just on paper at least. But this is the trade that I cooked up. I know it's a big one because it was also very difficult to do. I have the Heat getting Brandon Ingram and Jalen Wells. The Pelicans are getting Malcolm Brogdon, Luke Kennard, and Santi Aldama's expiring contracts, in addition to 2 second-round picks. Of course, the Grizzlies are getting Jimmy Butler. And then I have the Wizards getting Marcus Smart, John Conchar, and Jake LaRavia. So from the Heat side of things, you're bringing in Brandon Ingram. And the best, whether you like him as a player or not, the best part about this is you are buying low. With Zach Lavine, you would be buying high, and Brandon Ingram, you're buying low. So that's value. And you win championships in this league by getting good value players. And it's sort of a low risk type of trade too, because if you bring in Brandon Ingram and he plays but doesn't play well, then you don't have to pay him. If you bring him in and he can't stay healthy, you don't have to pay him. If you bring him in and you're unsure, well, now maybe you can resign him, but at a much lower deal than what he's at now or what Zach Lavine's going to be getting. Because we said Zach Lavine's making like, $49 million next year? Maybe Brandon Ingram comes in this year and he's still working his way back from that injury, but you want to re-sign him. Maybe you re-sign him on a 1-year deal, a 1-year prove-it deal. Now you have his money coming off the books for that 2026 free agency, and you have pretty much another year of risk-free Brandon Ingram because you're not paying him nothing. I just think it's a very good idea to buy so low on a guy that's still young, has a great fit with this team, and has shown that he can be a great scorer. And then let's say it doesn't work out and he does walk or you don't pay him or whatever, you still will be getting Jalen Wells, who has 6'8", great shooter, 38%, great perimeter defender. We know he would fit next to Tyler Hero as well. So you're still walking out of here with something at the very least. Now, the Pelicans, they're getting 3 expiring deals, which obviously helps them clear their salary cap sheet. Luke Kennard does provide them some spacing. You need that with Zion. But more importantly, Santi Aldama, 6'11", a very, very good shooter, exactly the type of guy that you would want to pair with Zion in the front court. So I do think he's a guy that the Pelicans would certainly look at re-signing. And the Grizzlies really can't afford to keep him. That's one of the few guys that can afford to keep, like a Jake LaRavia as well. So I think the Grizzlies would be okay with letting him walk because, of course, they're getting Jimmy Butler in return. But from the Pelican side of things, I know it doesn't look like a lot of value, a few expirings and 2 second-round picks. But for a guy who's only played 18 games this year and could walk in free agency, I just don't think he has a lot of value. I'm sorry, Pelicans fans. I just don't believe Brandon Ingram has a lot of value. So if you can clear your books and get a couple of second-round picks and a guy in Santi Aldama that you should want to re-sign, I think that's the best they can do at this point. Of course, the Grizzlies get Jimmy Butler, and the Wizards get Marcus Smart, and Jake LaRavia is a nice young piece too. But really, they're just kind of getting some value for the expiring Malcolm Brogdon contract. If they need to get a second-round pick from either us or the Grizzlies, I'm sure we can make that work too, just like the other trades. I just really like that Malcolm Brogdon expiring deal. It's very hard to find large expiring money in this league. I think there's some value in that, and that's what Malcolm Brogdon is at this point. And of course, for the Grizzlies, Jimmy he could walk in this offseason, but they're not giving up a ton here. They're not giving up anything except the second-round pick and Jalen Wells as far as assets. So I certainly think this is something they would do. So overall, I could see all the teams doing this, and personally, it is my favorite trade of the video. But that's really all I got to say for this video. I spent way too long recording this video and making these trades, so I'm going to make the outro quick and go enjoy my vacation, even though it doesn't technically start for 2 days by the time I'm recording this. But y'all know the deal. Like the video, comment all your thoughts down below. Let me know which of these trades you like the best. I will be reading every single comment, and make sure to subscribe because I'm on the grind to hit 7K subs. That being said, I'll see y'all when I return from vacation or during vacation if something happens. Who the hell knows? I don't know. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And I'll see y'all then. Peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city, tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.